Back in 1979, Ridley Scott released one of the greatest sci-fi horrors of all time, the enduring classic Alien. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon was inspired to write a dark script featuring Alien after working on the sci-fi comedy film Dark Star, directed by John Carpenter. The film compelled O'Bannon to really want to create an alien film where the alien looked real. He wanted to take a more horror approach, with the idea of Jaws in space being the selling point. Early on, O'Bannon had 29 pages of a script in which a crew of astronauts wakes up to find they are receiving a signal from a mysterious planetoid. This early idea went on to become the opening scenes of Alien, but at the time O'Bannon just couldn't work out who or what the alien would be in the story. O'Bannon eventually started working with fellow screenwriter Robert Shusett, and the two came up with the idea of one of the crew members being implanted with an alien embryo that would burst out, as the two writers really wanted a special and interesting way for the alien to get on the ship that would set the film apart from what people had seen before. O'Bannon admitted a lot of the writing for Alien was inspired by classic sci-fi such as The Thing from Another World from 1951 or Forbidden Planet from 1956, but wanted to take that influence and take it further. The two writers were preparing to sign a deal with Roger Corman's studio when at the last moment they passed the script to Gordon Carroll, David Glyer and Walter Hill, who had formed a production company called Brandywine with ties to 20th Century Fox. They signed a deal, however the company wanted to alter the script, causing tension with O'Bannon and Shusett, who believed they were making the script worse, not better. However, some of the additions went on to pay off, such as the character of Ash, who the crew do not know is an android until it's too late. Shusett went on to describe that as one of the best elements of the movie. After the monumental success of Star Wars in 1977, the studio's interest in sci-fi rose dramatically as the genre exploded with popularity. Alien was suddenly fast-tracked and greenlit by 20th Century Fox with an initial budget of $4.2 million. The movie was funded by North America but actually made by the British production side of 20th Century Fox. O'Bannon initially believed he would direct the film, but Fox instead asked Walter Hill. Hill declined due to other commitments, and other directors such as Peter Yates, Jack Clayton and Robert Aldrich were considered. However, O'Bannon and Shusett were reluctant as they thought these directors would instead treat the movie as a B-monster picture. The production company were impressed by Ridley Scott's debut film, The Duelist from 1977, and offered the directing chair to him, which Scott quickly accepted. Scott understood the project and really believed in emphasizing the horror in Alien, calling the film the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of science fiction. Now that would be a movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre vs Alien. Scott employed casting director Mary Selway, who he had worked with on The Duelist, to head up finding the crew of the ship. The approach was truckers in space, still going through the same working struggles as people in our time, a concept which was inspired partly by Star Wars, which deviated from a pristine future and still, despite the revolutionary technology, had people living regular lives. Sigourney Weaver is of course now synonymous with this franchise and is known as one of the female actresses who showed women could carry these sorts of movies just as well as men. Weaver had Broadway experience but was relatively unknown. She impressed Scott with her audition but was actually one of the last actors cast, as a lot of her screen tests took place in the studio as the sets were being built. Ripley was Weaver's first leading role and earned her nominations for a Saturn Award for Best Actress and a BAFTA for Most Promising Newcomer to a leading film role. Tom Skerritt was cast as Dallas, the captain of the Nostromo ship. Skerritt declined initially before there was a director, but once Scott was involved, accepted. Veronica Cartwright was cast as Lambert, the Nostromo's navigator. Cartwright was well versed in horror and sci-fi, as she had appeared in The Birds in 1963 and Invasion of the Body Snatchers a year before. She was originally considered for Ripley and was not informed she was playing Lambert until she actually arrived for filming. She was convinced the role of Lambert was better for her, as it was the role that most conveyed and reflected what the audience would be feeling. Cartwright went on to win a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress. John Hurt was approached to play Kane, the executive officer who becomes the host for the Alien. Scott was very keen on John Hurt being in the film, however he was working on Zulu Dawn in Africa at the same time as Alien's filming schedule. John Finch was instead cast, but became ill on the first day of shooting and Hurt was back in London by this time, so he quickly replaced Finch. He also received a BAFTA nomination for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Ian Holm was selected to play Ash, the ship's science officer who is secretly an android. Holm was a character actor who by 1979 had already been in a staggering 20 movies. Yaphet Kotto was cast to play Parker, the chief engineer. Kotto provided the cast with some much needed diversity and earned the role based on his recent impressive performance as the mysterious Bond villain Dr. Kananga in Live and Let Die. Kananga's one of my favourite Bond villains, so I always love seeing Yaphet Kotto pop up in films. He's a great actor.
So we could try something in an even simpler vein.
On the contrary, Mr. Barr, I think you'll find those rules quite fatal.
Harry Dean Stanton was selected for the engineering technician Brett. Stanton was not a fan of sci-fi or monster movies, but Scott convinced him Alien would be more of a thriller than the horror movies he knew. When designing the iconic Alien, O'Bannon introduced Scott to the artwork of H.R. Giger, citing his painting Necronom as the inspiration for the monster they wanted to create. The facehugger was the first creature that Giger designed for the film. Fellow artist Ron Cobb came up with the idea that the creature would have acid as blood, as would the fully grown alien, which would make it virtually impossible for the crew to eliminate the creature by regular means, such as guns, since the acid would burn through them and the ship. The design of the facehugger was also inspired by Francis Bacon's 1944 painting, 3 Studies for Figures at the Base of a Crucifixion. The facehugger is of course the beginning of the alien's attack, latching onto the host's face before eventually going inside. O'Bannon credits his experiences with Crohn's disease, a condition that compels incredible abdominal pain, for him coming up with the iconic chest bursting sequence. When filming the chest burster scene everyone remembers, the cast members knew that the creature would be bursting out, but they were not told that blood would be bursting out in every direction in high pressure pumps. In contrast to a lot of claims, the scene was not filmed in one take. Was actually shot twice, as on the first take the chest burster did not make it through Kane's shirt. However, the failed attempt is still visible in the film, as Ridley Scott decided to keep it, as it showed the creature struggling to push its way out, thus making the scene more violent and uncomfortable. The sequence was shot using an artificial body filled with blood, and the creature was pushed up through the torso by a puppeteer who held it on a stick. A stream of blood exploded directly at Veronica Cartwright, causing her to go into shock and hysterics, with her reaction kept in the film. Yaphet Kotto was also overwhelmed by the amount of blood and the unpleasantness of the situation, and went home that day very disturbed. These wonderful practical effects are still remembered today, and this scene is one of the best examples of a lost way of working that many of us movie buffs really wish would return. When creating the adult alien, Giger was very experimental, sculpting the body using plasticine, incorporating pieces such as vertebrae from snakes and cooling tubes from a Rolls Royce. Wow, the creature's head was manufactured separately by Carlo Rambaldi, who had been instrumental in creating the aliens for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A system of hinges and cables were used to operate the alien's rigid tongue, which stuck out from its mouth and featured a second mouth at its tip, complete with its own set of portable teeth. The final head for the character had about 900 moving parts in all, with part of a human skull used as the face, hidden under the smooth translucent cover of the head. Huge amounts of KY jelly were utilised to simulate saliva and to give the alien a slimy and slippery appearance. For much of the movie, there was indeed a human being inside the monster. Balaji Badejo was the man in question, with a latex costume built to fit Badaje's slender 6'10" frame by taking a full body plaster cast. Badejo beat out none other than Peter Mayhew for the part. Mayhew of course was well known for playing another alien, our beloved Chewbacca from Star Wars. Badejo made an effort to be convincing as the alien, by attending chi and mime classes to create interesting movements for the character. For certain moments, however, such as when the alien lowers itself from the ceiling, the beast was actually portrayed by stuntmen Eddie Powell and Roy Scammell. The 3 decks of the Nostromo were each created almost completely in one piece, and the actors had to make their way through the hallways that connected the stages, and this added to the film's claustrophobic feeling. The film's art director Roger Christian used scrap metal and parts to create parts of the sets to save money, which is a technique he actually employed whilst working on none other than Star Wars. One example of this is the Nostromo's corridors. They were partly created from portions of scrapped bomber aircraft, with a mirror used to create the illusion of longer corridors in the lower deck. H.R. Giger not only created the look of the alien, he also designed the interior of the derelict spacecraft and egg chamber that the crew discover. He used dried bones with plaster to sculpt much of the scenery and elements. Actress Veronica Cartwright described the set as strangely erotic. Okay Veronica, moving on. 20th Century Fox were not keen on the set with a deceased alien creature, as they deemed it as too expensive for a set that could only be in one scene. Ridley Scott and the team managed to convince the studio the set was needed to impress the audience and make them aware this was a serious movie with spectacle. However, to save money, only one wall of the set was created, but the giant dead creature could be rotated to allow for shots from different angles. It's impressive to think this set was only one wall, as it feels incredibly large and absorbing. In early drafts of the script, the eggs were actually supposed to be found in a separate pyramid building, which would contain statues and hieroglyphs depicting the alien's reproductive cycle. There was concept artwork created for this, but the scenes were eventually dropped to shorten the film. The egg chamber and the deceased alien sets were ultimately combined into one, and believe it or not, the light effects in the egg chamber scene were created by lasers borrowed from none other than English rock band The Who. The band was testing the lasers for their stage show on the soundstage nearby, so if Alien wasn't perfect enough, it also earned the right to rock.
These go to 11.
O'Bannon enlisted the help of artists Rob Cobb and Chris Foss, with whom he had worked on Dark Star, to complete the design of the spaceship and spacesuits. The name of the ship came from Joseph Conrad's 1904 novel Nostromo, and the ship went through hundreds of design concepts. The ships and planets in the film were shot using models and miniatures, an approach proven to captivate people in Star Wars 2 years before, giving the crew confidence to use models made of wood, plastic and some of the finer details added from model kits of warships, tanks and World War II bombers. The Nostromo was originally supposed to be yellow, and was filmed in this colour for 6 weeks before one of the visual effects supervisors, Brian Johnson, left to work on The Empire Strikes Back. Scott immediately ordered the ship to be changed to grey, and the team had to begin shooting again from scratch. 3 models of the Nostromo were made, one a 30cm version for medium and long shots, another 1.2 meters for rear shots, and finally a 12'7" short-ton rig for the undocking and planetoid surface sequences. The spacesuits worn by the actors were large, bulky items lined with nylon and with no outlets for breath or condensation. As the actors were working under hot studio lights in conditions in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, they actually each passed out several times. A nurse had to be on set to keep supplying them with oxygen. It was only after Ridley Scott and cinematographer Derek Van Lint's children were used in the suits for long shots, and they passed out also, that some modifications were made to the costumes. Savage filmmaking from Mr. Scott there. Is he related to Stanley Kubrick by any chance? Alien had a limited release in American theatres on May 25th, 1979. Editor Terry Rawlings said of one of the early screenings in Dallas that it was the most incredible preview he had ever been in, and people were screaming and running out of the theatre. The film received a wide release on June 22nd, but UK audiences had to wait until September the 6th. Alien was a commercial success, setting 51 house records and grossing over $3 million over the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. In the first 4 weeks it gained $16.5 million from only 148 prints. Over the water in the UK, the film grossed over $126,000 in its first 4 days, setting a house record, and by the beginning of October 79, the movie had grossed $27 million internationally. Surprisingly, initial reviews of Alien were not especially enthusiastic. Reviews from such publications as Variety, Sight and Sound, and from well-known film critic Leonard Maltin were either mixed or negative. Maltin went on, like many, to reassess his views later on and give Alien a positive review. Time Out, for example, called Alien an empty bag of tricks with no imagination. Wow. But other film critics Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel were a bit kinder, both giving the film thumbs up, but perhaps half-heartedly, as Siskel said the film was essentially a haunted house film in space and not much else. Ebert, whilst praising the film, was in some agreement with his partner. Many years later, Roger Ebert revised his opinion of Alien, placing it on his great movies list and calling the film a great original piece of work. Despite this shaky start with our lovely critics, Alien has gone on over the years to receive widespread acclaim and has of course become known as one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. Alien is a truly unforgettable film. Rewatching this, I was honestly left imagining in my head what it would be like to watch this movie in the theatre on the night it was released in 1979. This is one of those movies where I wish I could have been there. I wish that feeling could be bottled of what people went through, because this is one of those films that changed everything. Ridley Scott suddenly unleashed on the world one of the most terrifying movie villains of all time, along with one of the most sympathetic protagonists of all time, all at once. As well as that, the stunning visuals and the haunting mood, to this day, have you on the edge of your seat. The slow pace is something I really appreciate these days because no film is being made like this. I really appreciate the way Ridley Scott slowly sets the mood and builds up the tension. So much is done to lull the audience into a false sense of security. Nothing is thrown in your face, but you know deep down, something is building underneath the surface. You don't know what, but you know it's something big. Of course, these days we all know about Alien, and there's been more Alien movies than there should have been. Dear God there has. But for me, I really try and put myself in that headspace of watching it for the first time. And to be honest, I think the quality is so high, even after seeing countless Alien movies, I can still be swept up in the mystery. That moment where the crew discovers the egg hive, and the facehugger first jumps out, feels so otherworldly, unpredictable, fascinating and horrifying all at once. Witnessing the facehugger is so surreal. That image is terrifying and groundbreaking. We had never seen a villain like this, full stop. And we'd never seen a villain where we cringe at what is actually being done to a person's body, but we don't even know what it is doing at the same time. And that makes it all the more scary. What is the evil little shit even doing? We are absolutely hooked, but at the same time, we can barely look. The chest bursting sequence is a prime example of Ridley Scott pulling and pushing the audience wherever he wants them. The facehugger is suddenly gone from the face of Kane. No one knows where it is, but they are so happy to see Kane well again, and he is happy also, laughing and joking with his friends. They sit down for a meal and it's all fun and games, and you and the characters can let off some steam. And then suddenly, bam, things shift straight back to terrifying, and we see something that would have blown people's minds back in the day. Even now, it looks fantastic. It would be spoiled with CGI today, and I think I would hold this scene up as possibly the holy grail of practical effects. It looks like something out of a horrific nightmare, and the image is forever ingrained in your mind. Everything about that moment looks real, and it has me wincing but unable to look away. Ridley Scott calms you down and then completely and utterly scares the lights out of you and ups the fear level. And that keeps on happening throughout Alien. Things calm down, but then the next time there's a scare, things have gone up a notch and the stakes are even higher. It is masterful filmmaking, and the real life surprise of the actors gave the chest bursting scene an intense sense of realism. It makes it a real moment in time for movies, a true example of capturing lightning in a bottle. Every scare builds on the last. Every time we see the alien, we see more than we saw last time, and so on. This might be one of the best structured films ever. The build is truly perfect. Great example of the build up is when Brett goes looking for the ship's cat, Jones. This lone crew member making his way through the murky ship, the water pouring down, and the dark shadows. There are several false scares, but they're actually so much better than the jump scares of today, because time is taken to build things up instead of predicting them. You were drawn into the atmosphere of this guy walking around, and then you were genuinely shaken when they come. Scott also holds on to several shots, sometimes so long it could rival a world cinema movie. He is in no hurry and lets the scene breathe. The uneasiness slowly but surely creep up, and of course the passageways, shadows and so many different areas where something could be hiding. just add to the mood and keep you scanning around with your eyes. The scene of course depicts two non-human creatures meeting who are the polar opposite. The cute little cat hiding while a remorseless predator is lurking. The use of the cat really emphasises the terror of the alien, because you of course feel sorry for the cat and notice the stark difference between one animal that provides comfort and another animalistic being that brings only pure terror and death. 4 different cats actually played Jonesy in the film, and to get one of the cats to react fearfully to the descending alien, a German Shepherd was actually placed in front of him, with a screen between the two, so the cat wouldn't see it at first. The screen was then suddenly removed to make Jones stop advancing and start hissing. Ah, poor Jonesy. Which makes me wonder when watching this movie, why the hell would anyone own a cat on a ship? Especially when it's not resigned to quarters. Like, there's no way of this cat being stopped from escaping. It's literally walking around the ship however it pleases. There's 1,000 places this animal could get lost. If it goes missing, you can never find it. Yeah, I think leave your cat at home. Don't bring it on a bloody spaceship. The alien is one of the most horrifying of all movie villains. The practical effects here are astonishing. This design is so creative, so monstrous, so mind-blowing. What Scott set out to do was create a character of nightmares that still was believable to actually exist. And that's exactly what he did with the alien. The design was animalistic and like a predator, while at the same time an otherworldly being. We can fear the alien as a hunter, but also as a horrific being from our dreams. Scott shoots the alien sparingly, so either the face or the tail or a brief shot of the body, or that haunting moment where it looms round the corner at Ripley in the final culmination. The intention is to keep the alien mysterious, yet at the same time just as scary and in your face as any other horror villain, and Ridley Scott strikes that balance so well. The alien is never actually filmed directly facing the camera due to the humanoid features of its face. Ridley Scott was determined at all costs to dispel any notion of a man in a rubber suit and film the beast in varying close-up angles of its ghastly profile, very rarely capturing the villain in its entirety. This is such a memorable cast with a diverse group of actors who each brought their own unique talents to the film. Of course we have Sigourney Weaver at the core, playing the now iconic Ripley. Weaver injects so much strength into Ripley. She's a real role model because she is pretty much the action hero of the film. Ridley Scott broke convention and gave a woman the main role that would usually be occupied by a tough guy male actor, but Weaver showed it didn't have to be that way, as she holds her own and commands so much respect and presence. She's a survivor, pure and simple, and her resourcefulness, quick thinking and witty remarks make her just as effective as any male hero. Ripley has many standoffs with several crew members, the Captain Dallas, as well as a very tense verbal showdown with Ash. We are immediately suspicious of Ash, and he of course goes on to be one of the biggest shocks in the film. When we are focused on the alien, we find out this guy is a maniac, insane, bonkers android. It's a complete out of left field reveal, and puts the characters in more jeopardy than they already were. And Ian Holm is haunting in the role. Even though these characters are out there in deep space, way beyond anything we can ever imagine at this point, they're still concerned with the same things we are, and Ridley Scott manages to make this space mission feel closer to home than it otherwise would. The actors spent time getting to know each other before filming, and that really shows on screen. The rapport is so believable between all of them, where you're really drawn into it, and their relationships feel like they have known each other for years. Yaphet Kotto is great as Parker, one of the main examples of the banter the crew engage in. He's very funny and has great energy. Veronica Cartwright as Lambert nails the horror of the situation so well. Her genuine reaction when seeing the alien come out of the chest was of course an honest reaction as discussed earlier, and possibly one of the best responses ever on film to what is happening in front of an actor. She continues to build sympathy as she is tearful and desperate, and reflects exactly how so many of us would feel in this situation. When she is tragically killed by the alien, her performance is one of the most fear-induced I have ever seen. Also worth mentioning John Hurt as Kane. He does very well at conveying the confusion but nervous happiness of the character once he believes he is free. He thinks he's out of trouble, but actually a whole world of terror and doom is around the corner for him. Of course, Ripley ends up being the sole survivor as we enter that heart-pounding final act. The entire movie has been building to this, and all the suspense and tension we've already seen is nothing compared to what we go through in this culmination. The ship is about to explode and there is smoke and flashing and lights everywhere. Everything is frantic, Ripley can't focus on anything, she's armed with just a flamethrower, she has to protect Jonesy the cat, she has to find a way to outsmart the alien and escape. It's just madness. All the elements are working against her, but Ripley shows she's not going down without a fight, and the alien has met its match in this fearless woman. Again, the brief shots we get of the alien looming are enough, as Ridley Scott likes to leave us constantly expecting the alien to be around every corner inside these claustrophobic corridors, and that's almost more scary than showing the monster. Of course Ripley thinks she has escaped, but we are not off the hook as the alien follows her to the escape pod. We're on the edge of our seats, as Ripley is in an even more enclosed space with the alien now than she already was. Scott forces Ripley to come face to face with the monster before she's able to release it out into space and finally have some sort of catharsis. There's such a final sense of relief at the end of Alien, and I think it's one of the most examples of any film where you feel the sense of release that Ripley does because you've been so deeply invested in her plight. Alien is a timeless horror masterpiece that still holds up to this day. The film still looks futuristic, it still looks better than 99% of everything that's out there today. It still conveys that same sense of wonder mixed with dread that it always did. It only grows more interesting, iconic and absorbing with time.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
After the huge success of Alien, discussions of a sequel quickly started. However, 20th Century Fox were fairly indifferent to it, telling Brandywine Productions, the team who had presented them with Alien, that costs would be the main concern in making a second film. Brandywine co-founder David Giler tasked his colleague Larry Wilson with finding a scriptwriter for an Alien sequel. Wilson was immediately drawn to the script of James Cameron's The Terminator, eagerly showing it to the rest of Brandywine. In November 1983, James Cameron had been tasked to submit a treatment for what was being called Alien 2, which received a mixed reaction by the studio, and the project was once again stuck in place. It took another removal of a studio president to once again move Alien 2 forward, with Lawrence Gordon taking over from Joe Wizan in July of 1984. Gordon was way more receptive to the idea, remarking he was surprised no one had picked up the Alien 2 treatment. During a break he had from the production of The Terminator, James Cameron developed his treatment further and actually devoted much of his free time to it, as he had low expectations for The Terminator. Wow, imagine writing The Terminator and thinking that it wouldn't be a success. Cameron's updated treatment managed to create some excitement for the potential of Alien 2, as studio execs were keen on the script, and Cameron now expressed a desire to also direct the movie. However, although they were keen on the script and wanted to make another film, the studio was not keen on Cameron, as at the time he had only directed Piranha 2: The Spawning, a low-budget independent horror. However, pure talent was on Cameron's side, as The Terminator in late 1984 was a shotgun blast through the movie industry, a critical and financial success that blew everyone away. Of course, he was immediately offered the directing chair for the second Alien. Meanwhile, poor old Ridley Scott, the genius behind the first film, claimed he was never actually offered the chance to direct the second movie, and admitted it was likely because he was a bit of a nightmare to work with on set. Cameron, as he has went on to have with so many of his projects, saw a real vision for the second Alien, which was now being referred to as, of course, Aliens. Cameron told Walter Hill of Brandywine it would be impossible to capture lightning in a bottle twice due to the emotion and novelty of the original, so his intention with Aliens was to combine the horror with the action of The Terminator. Cameron likened the first Alien to a haunted attraction ride, but he wanted Aliens to be a roller coaster.
That for all the negatives involved in making a sequel, you have positives, and one of the positives is if you can take that initial programming that the audience has from the other film and then do little twists and turns on it and like you said, play against their expectation of what's going to happen. if it's done in a not hostile way to the audience, then they realize that there's a little bit of fun involved.
Early on, Sigourney Weaver actually rejected offers to return as Ellen Ripley. Even though she was impressed with Cameron's script, Weaver was principled and refused to do the film unless it was proven to her this was not just a cash-in. Eventually, Weaver received $1 million and a percentage of the box office profits, which was the biggest salary yet in her career. Twisting her arm took a long time, and at one point James Cameron was strongly considering writing her out of the film, until the last moment they reached a deal. A lot of what won Weaver round was the feminist ideas Cameron was introducing for her character in Aliens. After Aliens, Ripley was named in the same category as Stallone and Schwarzenegger's action hero roles, and ever since Aliens, females in film and TV have evolved greatly. Films such as Silence of the Lambs and Terminator 2 quickly followed, both headed by strong and capable females. Cameron made it a point that he was going to neutralise the male characters and have Ripley face the female queen alone, this time having it be a rescue mission and a fight, instead of just Ripley trying to stealthily escape. Cameron was next on the hunt for the actors to play the Marines in the film, and Stephen Lang was originally approached for the role of Hicks, and then James Remar's name was in the mix. Remar ended up getting the role, but he was dismissed for drug possession, and so Michael Biehn, fresh off playing Carl Reese in The Terminator, was cast as the trusty Corporal Hicks. Bill Paxton was cast as Hudson after a chance meeting with Cameron at Los Angeles International Airport, during which they discussed a possible role. Paxton was interested in creating a little comic relief in the film, to provide some levity to all the terror. Paxton did this very well and improvised a lot of his lines. Lance Henriksen was selected to play the mission's android, Bishop. Henriksen was determined to match Ian Holm's wonderful performance in Alien, and took a different approach, wanting to play Bishop as genuinely curious and innocent instead of menacing. Henriksen was considering walking away from acting at the time due to a lack of success up until then, but Aliens went on to be such a big hit, Henriksen carried on his film career. All three of these actors were fresh off working with Cameron on The Terminator and had built up a trust with the director, which led them to give very committed performances in Aliens. Jeanette Goldstein made her feature film debut as Vasquez and got into shape for the role. In order to play a Chicano character, she studied Mexican-American gang interviews to develop her mannerisms and accent. Cameron said of Carrie Henn that she had a great face and expressive eyes, and was perfect to play the lost and terrified youngster. Principal photography for Alien started in September of 1985, and the production was given a budget of $18.5 million. Filming took place largely at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire near London, England. And one of the main reasons for this was the large sets and the lower cost of filming in the UK. Early on, the crew didn't take too kindly to James Cameron, as he was very hands-on and aggressive, and they resented him being so confident with his relative inexperience. Cameron had huge disagreements with certain crew members who deliberately did shots a different way to how he wanted them, just to irk him. This led to several firings and even a few walkouts early on. Another key figure in the making of the first Alien, artist H.R. Giger, would not be involved in Aliens because at the time he was contractually tied to Poltergeist 2, and Fox was not allowed to negotiate with him. To fill Giger's shoes, a more than fitting replacement was selected in special effects whiz Stan Winston. The idea was to remain faithful to Giger's work, but take it further where they could. The aliens this time around were played by dancers and stuntmen in lightweight costumes that allow for quick movement. Although Alien goes from having one alien to many, only 12 alien suits were actually constructed for the film. Simple black leotards covered in moulded foam were utilised for faster moving shots, and detailed models with emphasised upper bodies and mouths were used for close-ups. This time, since the aliens were constantly on the attack, and some were killed in mid-air, for these effects, puppets were hung up and detonated. When designing the iconic Alien Queen, Stan Winston described his approach as combining a praying mantis with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Cameron was not keen on the T-Rex idea, however, and said any dinosaur influences were negligible for him, as he found them very obvious and boring. Never heard anyone refer to a T-Rex as boring, but okay, it's James Cameron, I'll give him a break. Cameron said the goal was simply to make the original alien larger and more powerful, but quicker and clearly female, describing the Alien Queen as hideous yet beautiful at the same time. A frame for the Alien Queen was erected that held two people covered in black polythene bags and hung on a crane. The final Alien Queen was a 14-foot puppet made of lightweight foam. 2 people were in the belly of the beast controlling the arms, and the legs were moved by rods connected at the ankles, along with a separate person whipping the tail with the use of a fishing line. Finally, the head was manoeuvred by 4 people utilising servo motors and hydraulics. Effects creator Shane Mahan dedicated several weeks to sculpt the alien queen's head, and 2 were eventually built, one lightweight and another more durable, and each was articulated with hydrochlorics and cables to control the queen's mouth and lips. As for the good old facehugger, the design remained faithful to that of the original film, however it was slightly altered, so it now appeared more organic. Its 8 legs were modified to become more finger-like, and fingernails were added. The facehuggers are more active than in Alien, with more action set pieces involving the little bastards. Due to this, the tail was lengthened on the facehugger by 6 inches to allow it more of a whipping action. A lot of effort was placed on making the facehugger scurry along the ground believably, and the crew eventually developed a control cable along the floor that activated a gear that caused appendages to move as it was tugged along. Another addition was arms added to the chestburster alien form, and Stan Winston explained he did this to go along with the idea that the beast drags itself out of the victim's chest. The fully built set then went on to be so large it had to be laid out diagonally across the stage, and forced perspective was used to add in areas that otherwise would not fit. Cameron designed the set to be as big as possible, so on screen it depicted the desolate nature of the colony, and the intention was for it to resemble a deserted western frontier town. Another large part of the set was of course the alien nest, which actually went on to remain in place after filming, and was later used as the Access Chemicals set in none other than Batman 1989. How cool is that? And I've just got an image in my head of Michael Keaton's Batman visiting the alien nest and beating the shit out of them all. Awesome.
Yeah.
Aliens received a wide release in the United States and Canada on July 18, 1986. During its open weekend, the film earned $10.1 million and beat out several new releases in the next few weeks. By the end of its theatrical run, Aliens had racked up about $85.1 million, making it the year's 7th highest grossing film. Aliens was extremely successful worldwide, with the global gross sitting between $131 million to $183 million. Aliens received generally positive reviews, however, once again, just as they were on the first Alien, beloved film critics Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel were not too keen, calling it intense and an attack on the senses, but ultimately left them feeling empty and emotionally drained. I don't think you go to Aliens for a feel-good, darn good time, guys, but okay. However, there was enough praise elsewhere, as Jay Boyer of the Orlando Sentinel called it the Jaws of the 1980s, and Variety critic Walter Goodman said it wasn't as good as the first Alien, but was still an incredibly strong film. Aliens was released on VHS in February 1987, and a few years after that, a longer cut of the film was aired on CBS in 1989, which included a deleted scene where Ripley learns about her daughter's death, as well as a scene showing Newt's family discovering the derelict alien ship and her father being attacked by a facehugger. This version was released on Laserdisc in 1991, now running 157 minutes long, 20 minutes longer than the theatrical cut, with Cameron stating he much preferred this version, which was later released on VHS and DVD in 1999, and then 2003 and 2010 on DVD and Blu-ray. Aliens is a turbocharged version of the first movie, just as Cameron did with the second Terminator film. Everything is elevated, and it's a great example of how to up the ante in a sequel but still retain the essence of the original. James Cameron was a master at doing this. Even though things are pushed to the next level, the movie still feels very under control and never goes over the top. Cameron can create the biggest action spectacle in the world and yet still have it feel like a thinker's movie, and that's not an ability many directors have. Ellen Ripley was such a sympathetic character in Alien, but now in Aliens, we like, respect, and are invested in her plight even more, because she's now scarred. She's seen the horrors, she's been through it, and yet she's still fighting to keep going. She's a real survivor. Although Ripley is incredibly tough and brave, she's also haunted and terrified, so we get several sides to her personality and her experience. Her character is incredibly human and believable. Sigourney Weaver's performance is so good when Ripley is waking up in a sweat in the middle of the night. It's heartbreaking. You really believe this is a damaged woman who has seen real horror. The fact she's still fighting and is so brave really commands your respect. but the fact she is also scarred shows you she's not a superhero and you can relate to her. Your heart goes out to Ripley because she is telling everyone around her how dangerous these aliens are, and no one takes her seriously. Kinda reminds me of Dr. Loomis in Halloween. She knows full well that there is evil out there, but the people around her just don't believe it. Despite this, Ripley still fights to protect those people by going back to the planet. And of course, she ends up leading the group of meathead Marines who don't take her serious at first. Even though she's working with a bunch of meatheads who are acting like goons, she still looks out for their safety and is resourceful, and ultimately, they all end up relying on her. Ripley is a very good person, and it doesn't matter if you've insulted her, she still won't leave you alone to face a terrifying threat. After finding out the terrible news about her daughter, Ripley gets a second chance to be a mother, and that adds another dimension to her character. Ripley and the crew discover a young girl who has somehow survived, Rebecca, nicknamed Newt. The relationship between her and Ripley is incredibly sweet as they find each other when they need to. Ripley is not going to miss the chance to save another daughter, so the effort she puts in to save Newt throughout becomes the heart of the entire film. Even in deep space with all this madness and desperation going on, the bond between a mother and her child is shown to be universal and timeless. The movie explores two completely different motherhood journeys, the sweet human relationship, and on the other side, the nightmarish alien queen, who is fiercely protective of her eggs and will do anything to ensure the survival of her offspring. Ripley and Newt is about building a connection and love. The alien queen's intentions are simply survival for her and her eggs, and if anything shows us the stark contrast between us and the aliens, it's that. There is no compromise or understanding between the two species, despite both fighting from a maternal point of view. Sigourney Weaver completely nails her performance in Aliens. Her confidence on screen has increased greatly, and she feels like a movie star. The conviction, intensity, but also vulnerability of her performance are all perfectly played, and this was a real career-defining movie for her. We still talk about her in this film to this day.
Get away from her, you bitch!
The Marines are very interesting characters because Cameron at first represents them as complete meathead stereotypes, and you don't really like them. They're a little annoying, to be honest. But when they get to the planet and realise things are not what they expected, and the way they normally deal with situations isn't going to cut it here, they suddenly become real people, and we start to like all of them. They experience a fall from grace from their egos, but then become real people, and we are then rooting for them to find some way to come out on top, because to be honest, who could have blamed them for not taking this seriously at first? So it's really interesting to see them become more and more human and vulnerable as time goes on. For example, Hudson, played by Bill Paxton, actually has a few emotional breakdowns in the film, and some of them are funny because of Paxton's delivery, and the lines are very memorable. However, some of them your heart genuinely goes out to him. It's fascinating to see a tough guy Marine break down. He is overwhelmed and confused, and that is quite a realistic element of the film.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do? We're some real pretty shit now, man.
You finished?
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Michael Biehn plays Corporal Hicks, and this, along with Kyle Reese in The Terminator, is one of the roles he is most remembered for. Biehn hasn't done a lot of stuff that is honoured, however this role, and of course Kyle Reese, are revered more than some actors' entire filmographies. So I think having a couple of roles that stand the test of time is way better than starring in lots of big stuff that no one actually remembers in the end. Biehn is great in this movie. He does an incredible job of portraying Hicks as a no-nonsense tough soldier, but also a human being who is compassionate and empathetic. Hicks is the perfect fit for Ripley, and to see a possible relationship blossom between two people who have seen terror and deserve some happiness is a joy to watch. Weaver and Biehn have great chemistry, and the two characters connect through gradually gaining respect and compassion and attraction for the other because they are so effective in their roles, but also good people who need someone. We also need to talk about the character of Bishop. This is one of Lars Henriksen's most memorable roles. Bishop is the polar opposite to the insane Ash in the first film. Despite being an android, he is more human-like this time round, and he's actually polite and friendly. It takes a while for Ripley to warm up to him, but Bishop really wins her over by proving androids can work with humans, as he shows bravery and even empathy, which are human traits.
Bishop, you did okay.
I did.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, a brief mention goes to Carrie Henner's Newt. If this child had been annoying, or a bad actress, or not understood the film she was doing, this character could have gone very wrong. But she's actually really good. She hits the beats where she needs to, and has automatic sympathy, obviously because she's a child, but at the same time the actress does convey a sense of tortured pain on her face, and manages to be believable. She also really convinces you she now loves Ripley like a mother, and that was essential. I think the scene where Ripley puts her to bed is a great example of that. It feels genuine from both actresses. The movie takes the jeopardy of the first film to new levels. Of course there are now multiple aliens, so the theme of a silent hunter has now been elevated to a sense of overwhelm and being under constant attack. When the characters are detecting the aliens on their tracker, and we see them approaching all at once, we are terrified for them. It's one of the most heart-pounding moments ever. Imagine being in that situation, dozens of these monsters literally imposing on you all at once. And throughout the film, Cameron barely gives you time to catch your breath because the aliens are always on the move and constantly a threat. Kind of creeps up on you how much you actually do like these people, because they have realised the error of their arrogant ways, but their soldier heart is still intact, so they are honourable in their desire to fight and survive. I think Vasquez's death is especially emotional, as she is literally shooting and throwing back grenades as they run through a tunnel, so she's almost entirely the reason everyone is okay, because she's holding back the threat. She keeps fighting to the end and dies with her commander, and even then she stays brave and doesn't let the aliens defeat her will, determination and sense of humour.
You always were an asshole, Gorman.
The final rescue scene of Newt still blows me away. Somehow Cameron beats the culmination in Aliens in terms of excitement, stakes, and dare I say it, direction. Cameron has spent the entirety of the film building so much sympathy and investment in the Ripley and Newt relationship, so you're honestly on tenterhooks because so much more is on the line now. The only thing that Ripley has left to fight for, her desire to finally stand up to the monstrous alien that caused her trauma, the fact the planet is about to bloody explode in a few minutes, a child is about to be cocooned. The stakes in this scene are literally crazy. Cameron is of course on top form with the camera, constantly moving it and creating a real sense of disorientation and panic. The angles are often low or high, also adding to the confusion and danger. Of course the lighting is spectacular, the dark and shadowy cargo bay with only a few lights, and of course the alien nest, which is literally like walking into a nightmare. It's dark as hell, and any light has an alien emerging from it. Of course Ripley does possibly the most badass thing she's ever done. She negotiates with the alien queen to let Newt go, but then literally says, "Go fuck yourself," to the species that has caused her and many others real terror and trauma, and she flamethrowers the whole egg nest. Badass. Of course this doesn't sit well with the alien, and we get another level of the culmination. Ripley now has to fight the alien one-on-one in her exosuit. Cameron has somehow elevated things again. He's made things even more epic and personal, and the alien queen finally gets a dose of her own medicine, as Ripley now has the size and the strength to take her on and kick her ass. Aliens is a true masterpiece, and I guess I have to answer that question. Which is better, Alien or Aliens? For me, I think it's Aliens, just, and I emphasise just. Aliens takes the horror and suspense of the original and expands on it in new and exciting ways, with one of the most proficient action directors ever.
Alien 3.
Following the huge success of Aliens, 20th Century Fox were putting pressure on Brandywine Productions to make a third installment. Brandywine were not keen to repeat themselves and wanted to take the story in a completely different direction, hoping to focus on the idea of corporations intent on using the aliens as biological weapons. One of the early concepts was an idea that would have actually drawn out across an Alien 3 and 4, with Michael Bihn's Corporal Hicks returning as the main character in Alien 3, with Ripley only having a cameo. The idea involved Hicks and a group of humans facing off with the corporation. Ripley would then return for the fourth movie, for an epic battle with the aliens that had been bred to be warriors. Sigourney Weaver was happy with the idea of a smaller role and a bigger one in Alien 4, saying she felt Ripley could actually become a burden to the story, remarking there are only so many things you can do with that character. 20th Century Fox agreed to finance the story, but were very keen that Brandywine twisted the arm of the director of the original Alien, Ridley Scott, to head the project. Scott was actually open to returning to the world of Alien, but his schedule didn't allow for it, and the idea of him returning was thrown out. David Giler and Walter Hill of Brandywine approached William Gibson to pen the script. The director of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Renny Harlin, was offered the directing chair after they were impressed by his work on that film. Harlin brought in some far-reaching ideas to the story of Alien 3, wanting to both visit the aliens' homeworld and have the aliens invade Earth. Gibson's script picked up straight after Alien, with the Sulaco ending up in an area of space named the Union of Progressive Peoples. Ripley is left in a coma while Hicks explores the space station he is taken to, and discovers the Weyland-Yutani Corporation are attempting to develop an alien army. The Union of Progressive People make a point to repair Bishop, and the aliens of course attack, and events culminate on a cliffhanger with Hicks and Bishop and a group of survivors deciding to track the aliens to their home planet and attempt to wipe them out forever. Sadly, the script never made it to screen, with the producers believing it didn't take enough risks and was too similar to the first two films. It kept the main character in a coma and completely shifted the focus to another character. How's that too similar? Gibson's script has gone on to become iconic among What If media, and fans basically willed into existence a comic series based on his script, and recently a novelization written by Pat Cadigan. After showing Gibson the door, screenwriter Eric Red, who wrote the overlooked horrors The Hitcher and Near Dark, was given the task of coming up with something completely different. However, Red himself was ashamed of what he came up with, going on to call it, in his own words, utter crap. He had attempted to be far too ambitious, bringing in an entirely new set of characters and subplots and wanting to explore new breeds of the alien. The movie would have opened with a team of special forces discovering that Ripley and her friends on the Sulaco were dead, and then the alien would go on to follow these new characters and target them. Brandywine rejected the script, believing it would be far too jarring of an idea to basically reboot from scratch. Desperate to find the right person for the job, Brandywine next approached David Twohy, giving him the starting point of Gibson's script and asking him to expand. Twohy was the one who came up with what eventually would be the setting of Alien 3, a prison planet. In his version, the planet was being utilised for illegal experiments on the aliens for a biological warfare division. Renny Harlin was frustrated with this idea and was growing tired of the lack of progress with the script and cut ties with the project. Fox were more accommodating to Twohy's script, but were very keen to get Sigourney Weaver back on board, calling her the centrepiece of the series. Weaver was offered $4 million to return and a share of the box office receipts. Weaver came with her own set of demands. She needed a very appealing script that was original, no longer wanted to focus on guns, and she wanted to kill off Ripley. Twohy swiftly took action to write Ripley into his screenplay, and it appeared Alien 3 was finally off the ground when director Vincent Ward replaced Harlin. However, Ward immediately made it known that he was not a fan of Twohy's script and started thinking up an idea where Ripley's escape pod crash lands on a monastery-like satellite. Ward took his idea to the studio and they approved it, and Twohy left the project in frustration that all this was done behind his back. We were now on to Ward's vision for Alien 3. He imagined the planet with an interior that was wooden and archaic, with Luddites-like monks living in it. Ripley arrives and throws the monks for a loop as they end up believing she has landed on the planet to test them with sexual temptation. When Ripley warns them about the alien, the monks end up capturing her and locking her in a dungeon, believing her and the alien to be part of the same curse, with the alien being the devil. Brandywine dragged their heels, saying that logical problems of creating and maintaining a wooden planet in space was a big issue for them, and the studio weren't keen too, describing the script as being on the artsy-fartsy side. Ward was eventually fired for standing passionately behind the script and not wanting to deviate. This idea for Alien 3 has gone on to fascinate fans, with many believing at the very least it could have been visually stunning and memorable, and the action and chase sequence could have been incredibly effective and unique on a wooden planet. Weaver herself was a big fan of it, calling the script original and arresting. Hill and Giler were back at square one, and feeling creatively drained, they brought another screenwriter on board in Larry Ferguson for one last shot at Alien 3. Giler and Hill went on to be very actively involved in this script and decided to combine aspects of the Wooden Planet script with Twoe's earlier Prison Planet suggestion. Finally, Hill and Giler needed a new director and decided to take a chance on music video director David Fincher. Fincher grabbed the opportunity with both hands and became hands-on with the screenplay, revising a lot of what was there but reaching a compromise with Brandywine. A very prominent plot point from the Twoe and Ward scripts that remained was the demise of fellow survivors Corporal Hicks, Newt and the android Bishop. This decision went on to haunt this film, as no matter what the ideas were, or even if the film was good in lots of people's eyes, most Alien fans could never forgive the idea of getting rid of two incredibly likeable characters who had been through so much and deserved better than to just be discarded right at the start like they did not even matter.
It's a shame that what I call the likability, a like story, that's what I used to call it, between her and I think could have developed in a third one. And then I think maybe I could have been killed off in the third one or something, where she really does fall for Hicks even more. I mean, you don't have to do that much more. There were only a couple little scenes in Aliens to get that kind of attraction that we had for each other. And you could just do a little bit more of that in Aliens 3, and then kill me off.
Fincher went about casting his Prison Planet by hiring some well-respected British actors, such as Charles Dance, who was cast as the prison's doctor Jonathan Clemens, Brian Glover, an actor with many credits including An American Werewolf in London and the British anarchic sitcom Bottom, and even, believe it or not, a pro wrestling career to his name, was selected to play Harold Andrews, the prison warden. None other than Doctor Who himself, Paul McGann, landed the role of Walter Golik, an outcast in the prison who ends up becoming obsessed with the alien, which leads to his doom. It was not just a film for the Brits, however, as Charles Dutton bagged the role of Leonard Dillon, an inmate who has taken on the duty of spiritual leader among the prisoners, who believes in redemption and keeping peace in the facility. Filming for Alien 3 began with a wide-eyed Fincher attacking the project with the script unfinished, and nearly $7 million already sunk into it. The movie was shot at Pinewood Studios, with some scenes shot at Blythe Power Station and a beach near Dowden in the UK to show the exterior of the planet. This really was a British affair, wasn't it? But to be perfectly honest, when you look into a lot of films, Britain is a very popular place to shoot movies, especially sci-fi. Fincher was trying his best on shaky ground with a real sense of unpredictability running throughout the project. Second guessing himself, Fincher apparently filmed several scenes that weren't used, including an alternate ending, which eliminated Ripley's ultimate sacrifice, as he feared it was too similar to the ending of Terminator 2, which had been released the previous year. Sigourney Weaver stood by the original ending, however, and really believed in it, so it stuck. At the young age of 27, Fincher was overwhelmed by the project, having constant run-ins with Fox and suffering a lot of frustration due to the uncertainty and mismanagement of the whole project by the studio.
It's amazing to me that Fox is the #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
This time the creature effects were done by Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alex Gillis, two former colleagues of Stan Winston who had their own company called Amalgamated Dynamics. The movie was the first to bring in that dreaded CGI for several shots. More on that later. Fincher said of the alien he wanted it to be more animalistic as opposed to the humanoid style of the first two films. The designer of the original Alien, H.R. Giger, returned to the series and revised the design of the alien, adding longer, thinner legs, removal of pipes around the spine, and a sharper alien tongue in place of the secondary jaws. Not much of his redesign actually made it into the final film, but the alien walking on all fours with long legs remained. Tom Woodruff Jr. decided to portray the alien himself and climbed into the suit and a rod puppet, which is a type of puppet that is controlled by the hands that occupies the interior of the model. This time, an entirely different approach was used to present the alien on screen, and the puppet was filmed against blue screen and optically composited into the live action footage, with the rods of the puppet eliminated by rotoscoping. A mechanical head was used for the close-ups of the alien, and Woodruff walked on all fours in the suit, and his head was contained in the neck of the suit because the head was actually filled with animatronics to move the mouth of the creature. Fincher's whole ambition for this new alien was speed, 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 so the crew were pushed to make the movements of the alien as quick as possible, to the point where they were at times barely even in control, creating a sense of believability of this alien, as an out-of-control, fast-paced predator. The film was subject to chaotic reshoots, and it ultimately was all too much for David Fincher, as he described the experience as agonising, and eventually, believe it or not, walked out. The movie was completed by the studio, who decided to drastically edit the film down, removing several scenes. Incredibly, the movie's ending scene was still being edited just a mere 3 weeks before Alien 3 was due to be released in the United States. Oh my god, what a mess. Much of this removed material went on to be featured in the film's eventual assembly cut, which we will talk about later in this video. Alien 3 was released in the US on May 22nd, 1992, debuting at number 2 in the box office, losing out to Lethal Weapon 3. Its first weekend grossed $23.1 million, and it was considered a flop in North America with a total of $55.4 million, although it did a whole lot better in Europe, netting a total of $104.3 million, with a worldwide total of $158.7 million. Ultimately, Alien 3 is the second highest earning Alien film excluding inflation, and it had the 28th highest domestic gross in 1992. Critics weren't especially kind to Alien 3, with beloved movie critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both giving Alien 3 a thumbs down, calling it repetitious, drawn out, and lacking suspense. Ebert gave Alien 3 a sort of compliment and an insult at the same time, calling it one of the best looking bad movies he had ever seen. David Fincher himself disowned the film, distancing himself from it at every turn and saying no one hated the film as much as him. Fast forward to December 2003 and a new version of Alien 3 was released as part of the Alien Quadrilogy DVD box set. The special edition of the film, known as the Assembly Cut, was created without any involvement of David Fincher, who had declined. The cut was put together by set producer Charles D. Lazareca and included over 30 minutes of extended, alternate and previously deleted scenes. The Assembly Cut went on to rescue Alien 3 in a lot of ways, as many fans have heralded this version and view it as a far superior film. Critics have praised it too, with critic Nick Shager calling it fantastic and fascinating, and another critic, Tim Brayton, describing it as more fleeting and driven despite it being 30 minutes longer. So in this video, when reviewing the film, I'll be looking at the theatrical cut first, and we'll follow that up with a look at all the differences in the Assembly Cut and discuss whether I believe it to be a stronger version of Alien 3. So let's take a look. I'll be honest, I never really saw the previous two Alien movies as nihilistic films. I never got that feeling. I always felt like, despite it being this awful and life-threatening situation, there was always a sense of hope under the surface. With Alien 3, they literally just said, nah, fuck it, forget that. This movie's going to be hardcore misery. Alien 3 is one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen, and I used to despise it for that reason, but in recent years I've come around to at least appreciate what David Fincher and everyone else was going for. It really is an honest depiction of nihilism, desolation, isolation. It's a culmination of the terror that Ripley has experienced. I can respect Alien 3 for fully committing to that, because in both the theatrical and assembly cut there is a real mood, an atmosphere, a sense of operatic sadness that is created. And I respect what they came up with because it's entirely unique in the series. It took a risk and changed the vibe of the franchise. Again, I wouldn't have took this route myself, and I'm still not the biggest fan in the world of Alien 3. The main argument against the film, and it's still the one I struggle to get past to be honest, is the fact that everything Ripley went through in Aliens was kind of pointless. And that really bothers me. This is probably the core issue that prevents me from really committing to liking Alien 3. Because there was so much emotional investment built up in Aliens with that relationship between Ripley and Newt. And to a smaller degree, but still very important, the relationship between Ripley and Hicks and Ripley and Bishop. Ripley went back for Newt and engaged in one of the best third acts in movie history. That scene where she fights the alien queen for Newt is literally movie magic. And it's really Ripley fighting to at least gain some positivity out of this. She deserved a daughter in Newt, and Newt deserved a mother. That feeling is so strong in Aliens. They deserved each other. Then Alien 3's just like, screw that, we're just gonna go hardcore. Bye Newt, bye Hicks, they are fucking dead. Fucking gone, mate. Deal with it. Oh, you were invested? Fuck you. It's over. This movie is hell now. Live with it. It's more just how jarring and in your face it is, and kind of needless to be honest. You didn't really need to do this. You could have still had a super downbeat film and Ripley again become isolated, and still have what she went through in Aliens actually mean something. You could remove Newt from the film in another way. Maybe she gets rescued, or maybe someone else looks after her. If the idea is you want Ripley alone again, you could still do that without disrespecting what happened in the last film. It could have easily been done. I find myself sat here asking myself, what gain is there in this film to just have a child die at the start? It's like a cheap way to create this horrible atmosphere. If you can't create that feeling with everything else and you have to resort to a child dying randomly, that's not a good sign. And to be fair, they do create a horrific, nihilistic, depressing feeling with all the other elements, so they didn't even really need to kill Hicks and Newt. It was just cheap and misguided. Ripley ends up on a planet of the worst, and that's again another issue with the movie. Every character is a horrible person, so you don't care about anyone. It's a different approach, and I think with Alien 3, you're not supposed to root for people, other than Ripley of course. It's more a film about being immersed and confronting the darkness of the human soul, right in front of you on screen. It's not the same as the first two films. At this point, Ripley has been through so much terror that this film basically says there's now nothing left, and you're going to see that on screen. The end of Ripley's journey will be surrounded by bad people with nothing left. This is what it's come to. This is the end of her journey. There is no happy ending. It's a complete switch from what usually happens in films, and I do enjoy that bravery, and it's done well on screen, but as someone who likes to get invested in characters, it's a bit of a struggle at times. However, one or two of the characters you can at least enjoy, such as Leonard Dillon, who is a great character. Charles Dutton really delivers as this inmate who is the spiritual leader of the prison, looking to lead the inmates on a path of redemption. His performance is fantastic. The conviction in his voice and the regret on his face really comes through. He genuinely is now a man of faith, and he truly wants to redeem himself, but he is well aware of the horror he is living in and how unforgivable, including him, these men are, and he grapples with that. Despite his tough exterior, Dillon is also a man with a great sense of compassion, which he has built from a deep understanding of the pain he caused in his past mistakes. He actually honestly cares about the inmates, and he shows genuine concern for Ripley's well-being, and is ultimately willing to put himself in harm's way to protect her, and this gives him a depth of character and a sense of emotional empathy.
I don't want no more bullshit around here. And we got problems, we stand together.
Yes.
It's a great nuanced performance about the idea of whether someone who has done horrific actions can be forgiven, and I think Dillon shows that it is possible, because no one hates what he has done more than himself, kind of like David Fincher with this film. There is a real religious theme running through Alien 3, and that's indeed one of the stronger ideas of the film. The idea of whether people are too far gone, or if life is still worth living or saving. And I think inserting that idea in a film about an alien going around picking people off is quite interesting. It's like the alien is the final Grim Reaper. The judgment day for these men is there to let them know time is up. Or is the alien itself the one thing that allows these men to actually reach forgiveness? If they can defeat this threat of evil, will they finally learn their redemption? Another good performance is Charles Dance as Jonathan Clemens, the doctor of the prison. There's a few more scenes of him in the assembly cut, which is good, because in the theatrical you end up wanting more of him. First off, Charles Dance is just a good actor, and he's very guarded in the role. We're left wondering what crime he is holding close to his chest, and why he is among the lowest of the low. Ripley and his relationship literally only lasts a few scenes, but it's strangely charming. The actors do very well, but I think these characters really gel well together. I think this relationship shows the goodness of Ripley, that she's willing to believe this man is good after all she's been through. And I think the character of Clemens is a great example of the grey area this film is trying to discuss. Clemens was sadly responsible for the deaths of 11 men by prescribing the wrong painkiller dosage. He is continually mentally torturing himself for this, but Ripley gives him some empathy despite his crime, and this perhaps restores his faith in himself. Ripley's the only woman among a group of hardened male convicts, and Clemens is a lost soul, still struggling to find his peace, forgiveness and place in the world. They both understand what it's like to be marginalised and misunderstood, and they bond over their shared experiences. Of course, in Alien and Aliens we had some truly stunning practical effects which, by Alien 3, were replaced with the lovely CGI that was about to take hold of movies. To be fair, the movie was released in 1992 and CGI was still in its infancy. However, in moments the alien still looks clunky and unrealistic compared to what came before. The alien sadly looks more like a cartoon character than a terrifying creature from another planet. The movements are jerky and unnatural, and a lot of the spectre was lost from the first two films. It's hard to take the alien serious in the movie when it looks so fake in certain moments. It's a shame because there are one or two moments in the movie that are genuinely unsettling with the alien, and it would have been fantastic if it looked good all the way through. One of these is the image the movie is known for when the alien goes face to face with Ripley. This is a very memorable shot and an example of Fincher bringing his own style to the movie that could be just as impactful as the two iconic directors that came before, just in a different way. And the actual look of the alien, I actually really like the whole animalistic style, the fact it looks more like a jungle predator in this movie. Fincher was more about the morbid, in-your-face aggression of the alien, and he has a few shots that were just as good as any veteran filmmaker could do. And they were creative, and showed Fincher would go on to do great things. I do admire the interesting new ways Fincher decides to show the alien, such as the POV moments. This is the first time in a series we see through the alien's eyes, and you would think this would take you out of the movie because obviously Alien and Aliens were always about the human perspective, and you never knew where the alien was. Fincher decides to take a risk and let us see a few shots from the alien's POV, and for me it gives a whole new appreciation for the danger of the alien, because you get to experience its speed, its desire to hunt, and its capabilities. Instead of identifying with the alien, we instead grow an extra level of fear for it because we get to see firsthand how screwed we would be if it was after us. That was something cool about the new Alien. It's just a shame that it didn't fully deliver in every scene. Sigourney Weaver is doing her best as Ripley. I don't think she knows what she wants to do with this. I feel like they just thought culmination, and that was the word they went with not much elaboration. The story of Ripley confronting her destiny and having to engage in the ultimate sacrifice. But there's no real shock or awe to Ripley making the ultimate sacrifice, because from minute one, the film is depressing. There's no surprise that Ripley is going to die, because, well, everyone else has, and we're just in this horrid situation for 2 hours. There's zero optimism or getting behind Ripley, because it's so predictable that things are going to end badly for her. So when Ripley's death scene rolls around, yes, it feels like a culmination, but not really one of Ripley's journey, more the film's journey of hopelessness. The film doesn't really benefit from having Ripley in it, which is entirely a departure from Alien and Aliens, where she is by far one of the strongest parts. Here, she just has a look on her face from the first moment you see her that's just like, kill me now, end it, I've had enough of this shit, I'm getting too old for this shit, as Danny Glover said, just pull the plug. And that wasn't Ripley. Ripley always believed in good and always had some optimism left in her. To see it completely gone just makes it not really Ripley. The image of Ripley falling into the flames has always stuck with me, and I think it could easily have been one of the best scenes in the franchise. And I think that might be the main issue with Alien 3, despite there being some interesting ideas and scenes and shots. The fact that you feel nothing is unforgivable. The scene looks cool, it's a good idea, but you don't feel anything because you kind of felt nothing for Ripley the entire movie. Even on a planet of evil men, you feel nothing. She's lost who she was, and there's no heart to her character anymore. I think it comes back to killing Hicks and Newt. You've robbed Ripley of her victories, her friends, her family, her hope, and you've given us nothing in their place. Just Ripley basically wanting to die for the whole film. I think you guys are slowly realising I really am conflicted on Alien 3. Some days I'm really fascinated and open to it. Sometimes I watch it and I'm just like, this is such a bummer. But of course, there's another version of Alien 3, so let's talk about the extended assembly cut and see if it fixes any of the issues with the theatrically released version. One of the best things about the assembly cut is the film gets to breathe more, and the atmosphere and ideas are given more time to sink in. Of course, if you're already not into these ideas, seeing more of them might not be a good thing. For me, even though I'm not keen on the ideas, as a film I appreciate seeing something given time to unfold. I am a big fan of a slow build and a large-scale operatic sci-fi atmosphere, even if I'm not keen on the actual script. For example, the opening scene with Clements on this desolate planet discovering Ripley is much stronger than how she's found in the theatrical, and it's a great looking scene. It has more style and scope and has some of the coolest and most memorable visuals in the film. I mean, seeing Ripley all black and charred is much more dramatic and is an image that is ingrained in your mind. I have to admit, there are lots of areas in the assembly cut I have to admire, because they're so well made and visually interesting. I didn't really enjoy just seeing the inmates have more scenes. I'm only really a fan of about 3 of them, so for me, seeing these cold-hearted criminals talk about how they would try and flirt with Ripley isn't the best addition in my mind. I didn't need it. However, anything new with Dylan and Clements is great, because these characters are very good. I kind of wish the alien picked off the whole ship really early and then it's just these guys and Ripley for the whole film. That would have been so much better. A great scene added involves Clements visiting Andrews in his office. We get a more intense verbal showdown and both actors are on fine form. There's a sense of mystery created which is important to the Clements character, as the question becomes what and how much does he know. Also really enjoyed the haunting scene where the character of Golic is discovered alone in a darkened hall in a bloody mess after releasing the alien. He's become obsessed with it at the expense of his own life. It's a haunting moment and another example of David Fincher's potential to create some really horrific visuals that are just as terrifying but at the same time entirely different to the style used in the first 2 movies. One moment in the assembly cut I would honestly actually change is early on when, after being told about her death, Ripley is asked if Newt is her daughter. She says no. She should have said yes, simple as that. If you're gonna kill Newt, at least give Ripley that. Give us something positive. The idea that Ripley believed, which she had every right to, that she could call herself Newt's mother, just give her that. The fact they don't make her say it bothers me, because it's a reflection of Ripley having zero hope from minute 1 in the film. Yes, she isn't Newt's mother and that's the honest answer, but after what Ripley went through in Aliens, she should have said yes. It would have at least softened the blow slightly that Newt is dead. The fact that Ripley doesn't even believe she has the right to call herself her mother frustrates me, because Ripley is dead behind the eyes now, and has none of her original personality. She's just a shell of a person now. An interesting element in the assembly cut that I'm not actually sure how I feel about, I'm 50-50 on it, is the fact that they managed to successfully capture the alien, sealing it away behind a door. Kind of strips the alien of its menace, but at the same time gives a scenario we've never seen in the movies. I kind of like the idea because it turns the tables on the alien, and I think it was time for the humans to get one over at least once. The alien seems more animalistic and ferocious in Alien 3, more of an aggressive predator who you just have to contain. So I think getting it behind closed doors for just a short time created a sense of relief, as it gives you a chance to breathe and the characters an opportunity to regroup. And I enjoyed these moments of Ripley trying to plan a strategy with these prisoners with limited weapons. Feels like a fallen army who have been thrown together, don't like each other, and are forced to come up with something quickly while they have the momentary advantage. There's a conversation in the assembly cut between Ripley and Dylan which I absolutely love, where Dylan basically insinuating he doesn't really care if the alien makes its way out there, because to him, that other world doesn't really exist in a way.
We've got our own little world out here. It ain't much, but it's ours.
So fuck everybody else.
No. Fuck them.
Ripley's sacrifice is far more impactful in the assembly cut, and we get some pretty riveting back and forth with her and the human who created Bishop. Lance Henriksen does pretty well because he's no longer Bishop and he's working for a corporation, so like Ripley we have no idea if we can trust him, and the standoff is pretty tense. Ripley's actual descent into the fire is far more built up and deliberated over, which I enjoyed, because in the theatrical cut I honestly felt like she just went fuck it and jumped in. Here there's actually several moments of thinking it over, deep breaths and consideration, so we at least feel a bit more when she decides to go through with it, because there's time for us to be on the edge of our seats and feel the weight of the situation. The assembly cut also shows no chest burster emerge from Ripley, so this death has far more grace, and it's more of a victory for Ripley despite her sacrifice. She's taken the alien with her, she can at least have some solace as she dies. Look, I don't want Ripley to die, but no one can deny the shots of Ripley in this scene are incredibly ingrained in people's minds. No matter the critiques of Alien 3, you think of the Alien franchise and Ripley falling into the flames is just as memorable as really any shot in the previous films. It's like Roger Ebert once said, and I can't remember about what film, but it wasn't Alien 3. The legendary critic said, "I respect what the director did, but I hate it." Bit harsh, but it's kind of the perfect description of mine and many fans' reactions to Alien 3. Maybe not hate, As I said, there's lots I can at least enjoy in the film, and the assembly cut is a lot better. It breathes, it has depth, it's more entertaining. But ultimately, I'm just not keen on the direction that the whole thing went, and I am in no rush to watch either the theatrical or assembly cut again anytime soon. So where was there to go in a fourth Alien movie after protagonist Ripley had launched herself into flames at the end of Alien 3? Well, never underestimate the power of the industry to dig up a franchise that appears to be dead and gone. Halloween Resurrection, anyone? And to be fair, Halloween Resurrection's explanation for coming back was actually more believable than the original idea for Alien 4, which was, and I'm not joking, to claim the events of Alien 3 was simply a nightmare experienced by Ripley.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest, Alien 3 was a bit of a bloody nightmare, but having that be the explanation is probably just as bad as Alien 3 itself, disrespecting the end of Aliens. You're just doing the same thing again. The good old what we just saw doesn't matter. 20th Century Fox thankfully came around to scrapping the dream idea and approached Joss Whedon to write a script for Alien 4. Whedon was very keen to bring the alien to Earth, with his early ideas culminating in a final battle between aliens and humans. David Giler and Walter Hill of Brandywine Entertainment, who had been involved in the franchise from the beginning, suggested the idea of cloning. The studio surprisingly decided to work with the cards they were dealt and initially accepted that Ripley would not be in the film, with the idea being that the fourth alien would centre around an adult clone of the character of Newt from Aliens. Sadly, this creative and interesting idea didn't last long, as the studio didn't want to take a risk not including Sigourney Weaver, and their intention quickly became to change the clone character from Newt to Ripley. Sigourney Weaver was reluctant to return as Ripley, believing the character had been liberated in Alien 3, and she did not want Alien to just continually be Ripley wakes up somewhere new with aliens running around. However, Weaver was more open to the clone idea, as she thought it would give her more dimensions to explore with the Ripley character now that she would be a new version. Weaver agreed to come back with a co-producer's credit, and she was paid the equivalent of the production budget of the first Alien, taking home $11 million. Well played, Sigourney, well played.
They can bill me.
Searching for a new director, the studio approached Danny Boyle, who directed Trainspotting and 28 Days Later. Boyle was interested in the project for a short time, but dropped out because he didn't want to take on a sequel. Peter Jackson felt the same. He was approached, but he could not get excited about a new Alien film. Names like David Cronenberg and Paul W.S. Anderson, who went on to direct Alien vs Predator, were also considered. However, the gig ultimately went to French director Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who had made a couple of provocative and interesting sci-fi films in Delicatessen and The City of the Lost Children, and Jeunet accepted the offer but required an interpreter throughout, as he did not speak much English when he took on the film. Jeunet actively went about trying to bring on board people who could help replicate a lot of his visual beats from his previous movies, and he hired special effects supervisor Jean-Christophe Comar and cinematographer Darius Kunji, both he had worked with on City of the Lost Children. Nigel Phelps was selected for production designer, having been the brains behind the look of Gotham City in the iconic Batman 1989, as well as Mega City 1 in the less well-received 1995 Judge Dredd film.
I never broke the law! I am the law!
For the design of the aliens, Jeunet was keen to bring back H.R. Giger, who designed the alien in the original classic. However, the team that worked on Alien 3, Amalgamated Dynamics, ended up being asked to return for Alien Resurrection. The group based their designs closely on what the aliens would get up to in the movie, with new elements such as swimming introduced, so the aliens were given pointed tails to assist this. They also modified them to have more pointed heads and chins, hoping to make them appear more vicious and in your face. Jeunet decided to use CGI aliens whenever the creature's legs were in frame, and Blue Sky Studios were hired to create these effects. This film also saw the introduction of a human-alien hybrid creature, and the crew were very excited by this, as it gave them a chance to construct something that was entirely new to the series. An early idea was to reproduce Sigourney Weaver's features, although the crew felt this approach would have been too similar to the design of the character Syl in 1995's cult sci-fi movie Species. However, eyes and nose were added to the new hybrid to allow it to communicate more emotion than the xenomorphs we knew, and the intention was to give the hybrid more depth and intrigue, as opposed to just being a soulless killing machine. But Junet ended up taking this a bit too far, as he desired to give the hybrid genitalia that was a mix of male and female. 20th Century Fox were uncomfortable with this, and Junet eventually changed his mind. Yeah, there's giving the creature more emotion, and then there's giving it a bit too much of a human touch, if you know what I mean. The genitalia are actually added though, with Junet removing them during post-production. So yeah, throughout the film's production, the animatronic did indeed have male and female genitalia mix. That is mental. The studio also wanted to cut the scene which is pretty much a love scene between Ripley and the hybrid, but they decided to keep it only after Sigourney Weaver told them she would not promote the film if the scene was cut. Why is everyone involved in the Alien series a bit of a weirdo?
Must be a chick thing.
The hybrid animatronic ended up requiring 9 puppeteers and was far more complex than the other Alien models in the film. The spaceships in Alien Resurrection were miniatures, with the visual effects supervisors resisting the use of CGI and believing models were much more realistic for ships. Yeah, tell that to today's filmmakers please. Junet rejected the original design for the USM Auriga, stating it was too vertical for the opening shot and that it reminded him too much of a space station. The crew ended up coming out with another design, which was more streamlined and acceptably horizontal. When casting the movie, Junet selected some pretty capable actors and actresses, such as Winona Ryder as Annalee Call, who is secretly a synthetic life form and has a troubled relationship with Ripley in the movie. Ryder admitted this is one of the roles she said yes to fastest, since she wanted to brag to her brothers that she was in an Alien film. She goes on to be one of the best characters in the movie, and Ryder, who's a great actress anyway, does her best with some inconsistent material that's now and again good and now and again goes nowhere. Ron Perlman plays Ron Jonah, a mercenary with a short temper who is probably a better version of the characters in Alien 3. He's a completely horrible lunatic, but he's actually pretty entertaining in his delivery.
Earth, man. What a shithole.
Brad Dourif was a significant casting choice for the movie, as Dr. Jonathan Jediman, one of the scientists who has cloned Ripley and is studying the aliens. Dourif completely gets lost in this performance, and he really understands the bizarre vibe Alien Resurrection is going for. Dominique Pinon was cast as Dom Vries, the Betty's mechanic who is wheelchair bound. Vries relates to Cole throughout the film and has a standoff slaying match all the way through with Ron, which is pretty entertaining. And as a character he's quite unique, and it's refreshing to see a disabled character actually being allowed to be badass and an important part of the film. Alien Resurrection was filmed at Fox Studios in Los Angeles, California from October 1996 to February 1997. The studio didn't pick the best time to film, as studio space was difficult to come by due to filming taking place at the same time for blockbusters such as Titanic, Starship Troopers and The Lost World Jurassic Park. Darn that James Cameron, taking up so much space with Titanic. Could you have brought it down a peg? However, it was Sigourney Weaver herself who decided to film the movie outside of England for the first time, believing the schedules in the previous entries had exhausted the crew. A big focus for Junet was portraying the new Ripley clone as skillful and unpredictable, so a scene was filmed in which Ripley throws a basketball through a hoop while facing the opposite direction. Weaver trained for 10 days, and Junet at one point considered using a machine to throw the ball, or even to CGI it. Weaver refused and was determined to genuinely make the shot. The scene required dozens of takes, with Weaver failing countless times. The crew were on the verge of giving up, but on her last shot, Weaver was successful and caused Ron Perlman to break character as he turned to the camera to exclaim his shock. There was enough of a pause between the successful dunk and Perlman's reaction for the film's editors to cut the scene accordingly during post-production. Weaver was delighted with the shot and has gone on to call it one of the proudest moments of her career. For the first time in the series, an underwater scene was shot, with the entirety of Stage 16 at Fox Studios reconstructed into a huge tank that contained 548,000 gallons of water. The actors were subjected to about 15 underwater training sessions in swimming pools around the Los Angeles area before arriving at the underwater set, where they underwent a further 2 weeks of training before anything was shot. Actress Winona Ryder struggled early on with the scene, as she had nearly drowned at the age of 12 and had not stepped foot in water since. She asked to use a body double, but ultimately realised it would have been too obvious to audiences. Admirably, Ryder filmed the scene, but suffered from severe anxiety. In order to heighten contrast, the cinematographer used an electric blue tint for the underwater sequence. He also added silver to the printing process. Throughout the movie, this had the result of making the dark colours richer and giving everything a metallic tinge. Alien Resurrection opened early in France on November 12, 1997, earning over $6 million and climbing its way to the top of the French box office. The film made its way to the United States and Canada on November 26 and debuted at number 2 at the box office, behind the Robin Williams Disney project, Flubber. The film went on to gross $47.8 million in the US and Canada, and was sadly the least successful Alien movie in that market. However, much like Alien 3, it was better received internationally, netting a worldwide gross of $161.4 million on a budget of $70 million. The film encountered a mixed reaction from critics, with an early good review coming from Entertainment Weekly, who awarded the sequel a B+, stating it was way ahead of the previous film and developed the story cleverly, ultimately resulting in a fresh and thoughtful take. Washington Post critic Desson Thompson was also positive, writing that the movie does recycle things, but it has a great deal of fun as it does so. Rolling Stone critic Peter Travers was positive too, saying the film may be slightly repetitive, but it is worthy of its predecessors due to the heroines of the film, Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder. However, there were also some pretty negative responses, with Janet Maslin of the New York Times calling the film murky, and beloved film critic Roger Ebert describing the film as not containing one single shot that would fill anyone with wonder, and he named it one of the worst films of 1997. Much like its predecessor Alien 3, Alien Resurrection is a difficult film for me to really sum up my feelings on. It certainly feels like more of a popcorn film than Alien 3, and it's a lot more exciting, but I do actually miss the contemplative dark themes of the previous movie, and obviously the perfect combination of horror and action of the film before that. While the movie introduces a lot of new bold ideas, they're not especially fleshed out, they're just kind of dropped in front of you, and you're asked to care. For example, Ripley's new life as a clone could have been way more interesting than it is. Don't get me wrong, Sigourney Weaver does pretty well with this mysterious performance, and she has far more of an edge now, but I thought the movie would take advantage of the whole what makes someone human idea. Can a clone still be the person they're made from? How do Ripley's memories affect her now? And would she go on a journey to regain the essence of the true Ellen Ripley? None of this is discussed. There is a little bit about who the Ripley clone will now be loyal to since she is a hybrid. There's kind of an intrigue there, but for me that's far less interesting than if this clone was trying to make sense of things and recapture her lost humanity. We all know Ripley isn't going to end up being on the side of the aliens. A far more fruitful idea would be, as I said, seeing if she can become Ripley again, grappling with what she does and doesn't remember. This is a big sci-fi theme in plenty of movies, and it would have been right at home in an Alien film. But instead they just make Ripley a bit weird and a bit more aggressive, and that's kind of it for the character development. The Ripley clone idea could have worked despite it being silly on paper, but for me it just ends up a lot of missed potential, despite Sigourney Weaver's committed performance.
And in a few hours, it's gonna burst its way through your rib cage, and you're gonna die. Any questions?
Seeing her kick the arse of people on the ship, and then of course the basketball scene, these moments are pretty fun to watch, but they don't get me especially interested. They're just cool scenes and they're fine, but the character I loved is entirely gone, so I'm not really invested anymore, despite some fun moments. This is probably the most blatant time in the series that Ripley is supposed to simply be a black and white action hero, and it's nice to see her with a sense of reckless abandon. But sadly I find myself missing the old Ripley. I miss her humanity, her bravery, her warmth, her conviction, and to see her reduced down to just, yeah, she's badass, is quite a shame to me if I'm being honest. While it's not a film full of great character interactions, in my view a lot of them are pointless, The relationship that develops between Ripley and Call is pretty interesting to watch despite it never really reaching its potential. Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder needed a few more scenes and some slightly better writing to really get this relationship off the ground. Although I did enjoy what they were hinting at here, which is a connection that starts off as resentment but ends up as mutual respect. Ripley has lost everything she has ever known, and Call has been programmed to feel emotions like a human. So Ripley's loss and Call's supposed gain help them to connect on a deeper level. This was the chance for Ripley to have a new daughter figure, and this time it would be an android, and we all know Ripley's history with them. And this was an android who was also lost, but for completely different reasons to Ripley. This could have produced so many thought-provoking exchanges and moments. The material was all there to make a serious science fiction film. This relationship could have been quintessentially sci-fi, but at the same time an entirely different interaction to anything we had seen in the series. The actors were just begging to be given the material. Winona Ryder is such a highlight, and she stands tall alongside Sigourney Weaver with her performance. But instead the film's just dedicated to being weird. Instead of actually exploring any of the themes it gives you, the movie just tries to be strange. There's suddenly more of a focus on body horror and disgusting imagery, and that becomes the direction of the film and takes precedence over the character interactions. And when I say weird, I think one of the many scenes that is the perfect depiction of that word is this one. It's Brad Dourif's Doctor making out with a glass that holds the alien queen. This is bananas. This moment is jarring and odd, but strangely haunting and entertaining at the same time. There's not many actors who could have pulled this off, with Brad Dourif being one of the only ones. He's so committed to the strange nature of the scene and the performance overall, and because of his earnest efforts, the scene becomes memorable. So yeah, this movie contains Chucky trying to kiss an alien. There's a crossover you never thought you'd see.
No fucking way!
Dourif is amazing in this film. You believe him to be a real messed up person who is so blinded by discovery that his morals and his sanity are slowly disappearing. It's written all over his face how dangerous this Doctor has become because of his work. His sick expressions and his obsessive compulsive speeches are really convincing and have your skin crawling almost as much as the aliens themselves. That's how disturbing this character is. Dourif is also the perfect actor for the body horror that Alien Resurrection is going for. Again, not many actors could pull off being shown with their body pulled apart whilst delivering lines that could be laughable but come across as quite horrific when Dourif is delivering them in this surreal situation. The film gives Hellraiser a run for its money with some of its body horror, I must say. We could have used more scenes like this, as Ripley is reduced to tears and her humanity comes through. It's actually one of the best performances of Weaver in a single scene in the series. I really felt her horror and the despair, and if we had scenes elsewhere where she grappled with regaining her humanity, moments like this would mean even more. Ripley being forced to wipe the room out with a flamethrower is so tragic to watch, and the horror of how things have turned out really hits you hard in this scene. It's a real heartbreaking moment to see the fall of humanity, how blinded we can get in the face of discovery that we end up becoming just as evil as anything that has ever existed in the name of this so-called greater good. The action and chase scenes in Resurrection are honestly a big improvement on Alien 3. Don't get me wrong, it's no aliens, but it's a great example of a 90s action film done right. It nails all those 90s beats with a focus on exhilaration, pace, and not much to think about, but having fun watching the screen. The underwater scene stands out specifically and was something we had not seen before in the franchise. It's incredibly well done. The lighting is fantastic, the hue of the water creates an eerie atmosphere, and the use of shadows and reflections adds to the tension and gives a new dimension to an alien chase. The camera angles are also great, with shots from above and below the water adding to the disorienting and suffocating feeling of this scene. I love Ripley's face where she witnesses one of the crew meet their demise underwater. It's a haunting moment and one of the finest examples of Sigourney Weaver doing her best with the material. I don't really care about the whole loyalty angle, as I've said, but at least Weaver makes it entertaining to watch here. You can't tell if she is sad about the death or if she is actually showing the alien respect and fascination. This is one of the most expertly crafted chase scenes in the whole franchise because the jeopardy is so creative. They are being pursued by an alien swimming away for their life, and when they get their head above water, they discover they are in the middle of the egg nest. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Or in this case, not just the fire, out of the frying pan into the bloody furnace. It's genuinely one of the most thrilling moments in the franchise because you're not expecting it. And when the chest tuggers start jumping at them above the surface while an alien is after them below, you're on the edge of your seat. It's one of the most urgent and nerve-wracking sequences in the whole Alien series. That's one of the biggest strengths of this imperfect film. The action is pretty much first class and quite creative in a fun 90s style. The newborn may be a creative idea, but I genuinely hate the look of the character. I'm glad they didn't use CGI, but I think it just looks goofy. It's just a really bad design. I just laugh whenever this big lummox is on screen. If you're going to take the focus off the iconic aliens in favour of a new hybrid, it better look good. But let's be honest, this creature looks a bit pathetic, and I can't really take it serious. Especially when Brad Dourif starts referring to it as an adorable little baby when it meets Ripley. While I love Brad Dourif, this is where I think his character, as well as the film, jumps the shark and crosses over from being enjoyably strange to just pure cringe.
Oh, look. Look, beautiful, beautiful little baby. Look, it thinks you're its mother.
You would think the eyes and the mouth might elicit sympathy from the viewer, and I suppose that's the idea behind it. For once in the series, we're supposed to actually empathise with the alien. For me, the absurdity and nonsense of the situation and the very strong thought in my head of how far the Alien series has fallen, that we are now seeing Ripley basically make out with an alien, yeah, I just couldn't get invested. That moment where Ripley does, yes, basically make out with a newborn is nutty. It's nonsense. It's where Alien Resurrection completely falls apart. Sigourney Weaver insisted this scene be included. And you know what? You could have had me on board, Sigourney. With a sympathetic alien, I could have got on board. But you making out with it as well? No, love. I can't cope with that. That's bonkers. I honestly would rather this alien did look like Ripley in the style of Species. At least it would have been memorable. Or maybe if Ripley had a standoff with the iconic alien that we know. But the alien ends up maybe having second thoughts about killing Ripley because of their connection. That could have been cool because it would have kind of looked badass to have Ripley come face to face with the horror that has haunted her, but is now looking at her as an equal and someone to respect. Ripley could then show her true allegiance and finally defeat the alien, this time both mentally as well as physically, wiping out the alien and removing any possible chance of there being a relationship between us and these monsters. So the whole thing would end in a huge liberation for humanity, finally overcoming this evil predator in such a triumphant way. But no, we get this big lump being treated like some kind of incest love child. It's just wrong. And you can't tell me, well, the whole idea is Ripley's the mother, so that's what they're going for. That theme wasn't explored. You can't just say that and pretend you're paying it off. All the way through, the most discussion we ever got about Ripley being the mother is, we're told Ripley's the mother, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about it more, we're going to examine it, we're going to explore the theme. No, we're just going to have Ripley make out with it while Brad Dourif's disconnected body says "coogie coogie coo" from the sidelines. Madness. So does the special edition of Alien Resurrection improve any of this? That was, of course, included when the film was released on DVD and Blu-ray. The special edition of Resurrection is a lot shorter than the one for Alien 3, and the changes are pretty mild. However, they do improve the film, for my money. There's an added moment of dialogue between Call and Ripley, which I was of course begging for. And there is a mention of Newt, and it's pretty emotional as Ripley says she no longer remembers her name.
There was this girl. She had bad dreams. I tried to help her. She died. Now I can't even remember her name.
This was great, and I think mentioning Newt is very respectful, and to keep on deleting her any chance they could get was frustrating, as the director said the theatrical was his ideal version of the film, so he didn't want this in there either. I genuinely don't know why the series seemed to want to eliminate the poignant relationship between Ripley and Newt, which was one of the best things in the whole series, and one of the elements that kept things grounded and special. Ripley makes the statement that she still has nightmares about the xenomorph, but waking up is now a lot worse. This was a great line and quite smart. Again, no need, but this movie seems determined to delete anything that's thoughtful in favour of just mindless action. The ending is also different in the special edition, and that's a lot better too. The closing moments in the theatrical cut are pretty empty, to be honest, and the film ends quite abruptly with the characters reaching Earth, and we don't get to see what Earth has become. In the special edition, there's quite a beautiful looking scene which is classic sci-fi, where Ripley and Cole find themselves on a desolate Earth, not knowing where to go and what to do. It's an interesting idea that in the whole time Ripley was fighting the aliens and trying to save humans, humans were destroying the Earth in the process. Ripley is no longer able to call Earth her home, and as the camera rises and we look out over what's left of the planet, she is no longer tied down by the people and trying to protect them. So in a way she's free, but once again, everything she fought for, she's realised perhaps wasn't worth it. It's so bleak, isn't it? It's a shame that the series I always thought had a bit of optimism underneath the surface, especially in Aliens, basically has continually stripped it away on purpose. But at least the way it does strip it away is through delivering tragic sci-fi ideas of what it means to be human, what is good and is it worth it, will humans ultimately destroy themselves. So I enjoy watching it, but again I just miss what Alien used to be. Ultimately, Alien Resurrection looks great. I love the metallic tone of the film and the visuals are pretty striking, there's lots of jarring imagery, the body horror effects are great, the action scenes are entertaining. But for me, quite simply put, the decisions and the ideas that didn't really pay off and at times were not even good anyway, are what bring the film down. The dialogue's also a bit clunky, there's a few great lines here and there, but ultimately I don't like hearing these characters talk. Of course, by the end of the movie you're sat there with your head in your hands when you see the newborn, asking how did this happen? How did Alien fall this far? So is it better than Alien 3? In some respects, yes. It's a much better action movie, and in some moments it's way more entertaining. But for me, despite not being a huge fan of Alien 3, I do find the film fascinating and I admire its ambition, and Alien 3 at least actually commits to its ideas. So in that respect, I find Alien 3 perhaps a more interesting movie than Resurrection. Resurrection isn't a terrible film, but sadly at this point in the series, the essence of what made Alien great was gone. So it suffers from real franchise fatigue. It doesn't feel the same anymore. And the fact there's actually a little bit of enjoyment to be had is honestly quite an achievement. So I think it was wise to stop here while there was still a little bit of dignity and respect left in the franchise. Until Ridley Scott got back hold of it, of course, but that's another story.